Hey guys, welcome to Mr. Culver's psychology class. Today, we are going to be focusing on the interaction of the person and the environment in determining perception. Not what you see, but what you perceive. And today we're going to be doing that through Gestalt principles of perception. Now, Gestalt principles of perception, according to a textbook, are principles that describe the brain's organization of sensory information into meaningful units and patterns. Now that's a textbook definition. I would define it as you have this entire world of so much going on, so many little bits and pieces, but we are going to organize this into units and patterns that will make sense. So when we have this overload of things that we see, we can perceive it into something that makes sense for us. It's just making perceptual sense of a chaotic world. It's seeing the whole different than how we see the parts. And in order to do this, there are 5 principles, Gestalt principles, that you need to know. First one is continuity. Second would be proximity. Third will be similarity. Fourth, closure. And fifth, figure-ground relationship. So first off, we have continuity. I like to use this image right here on the right in order to understand continuity. When you look at it, it looks like there's a straight line going through here, and then another straight line going up and down and up and down. But what's to stop us from saying that this is a half circle above and a half circle below and a half circle above? How come we know that it keeps going right here and it doesn't just stop and start something new? Because of the Gestalt principle, continuity, we perceive it as going straight through, or going straight through the other lines, and we see 2 distinct lines when we look through this image. This is something that can help us a lot if we're in wilderness survival mode and we see the snake right here. We know that it's one snake that kind of just curls up and around the branch. Goes up like that and around. It helps us because we can see the snake and know what it is, where it is, and what it's doing, instead of just a bunch of little random lines. Second off, we have proximity. Proximity helps us group things into images based on where they are located. So right here in A, we can see 6 distinct groups, one for each of these dots, or maybe even just one big group of dots. Right here in image B, they split off into pairs. Because they're closer to each other, we want to see 3 groups instead of 6 groups. Even though they are 6 distinct things like this, because they are separated into their own little pairs, it makes us see 3 groups instead. C is interesting because even though they're different size, because of where they're located, we want to put them together according to what they're nearby, and so we see 4 groups, even if they are different sizes. This image right here over on the right helps us understand proximity a little bit more. In reality, we're just looking at a bunch of little triangles. But when we piece them all together, we see the Statue of Liberty. But when you look at any little individual piece, maybe put your hand over the screen to cover it up, we just see a little triangle, a little triangle, a little triangle. It's nothing interesting until we use all of the parts to make a different whole. So it's kind of like proximity, but similarity uses distinguishing features of our shapes or of our image in order for us to put them into groups. And so when we look at this one on the right, they're all just a bunch of little circles, but using the color is something that distinguishes them. So they have that similar feature of color, which will help us put them into little different groups. Like this pink line will be its own group, this yellow box is its own group. As with the blue and the green and the orange, we're going to see them according to what similar feature they have, and we're going to see them into little groups. And so it helps us see the little shape right here. We can see a square. There's no real square there, but because we group them into a little different shape according to their yellow feature, then we actually see a square. Over here, we can see different shapes and different lines according to what is similar about them. This one, it's color. This one uses shape. There's squares and there's circles. And so we see different lines kind of striping down through this. On this one, we see like a T and 4 different little boxes because of what similar features are there. Closure, this one's a little more interesting. This one, there is no actual line going through the different shapes, but you can kind of perceive a line because our brain uses closure to draw little lines where we feel like there should be something there. So for example, on this panda, there's no line right here. These are just like random little black dots sticking out of it. But we can kind of make a line with our mind to enclose it, to create closure in this picture. So it helps us figure out the whole shape despite there only being little parts. And you can see that when we go into this next picture right here. This is where the closure is occurring, on these different lines. Now this one is the figure ground distinction. It's really interesting if you look at this picture here. What do you see? Well, you could see a lady, or you could see a man playing the saxophone. Now the interesting thing with figure ground distinction is depending on what you make as the main object of the image and what you see as the background of an image can change your entire perception of it. So figure is the object that is there at large. And we can see that really well with this example. If you look and you see a vase, that will be the object at large. That will be the figure of the image. The ground kind of helps us because we know the word background. It's the backdrop of the image. It's what's not the focal point. It's what's there and back. So on this image right here, the vase will be the figure and the blackness will be the ground. But because we like to look at optical illusions in order to help us understand things for Gestalt principles, you can also switch it around. What do you see if you make black the figure and white the ground? If black is the figure and white is the background, then you will see a couple faces looking at each other. It's no longer a vase, it's two faces that are looking at each other. And so it's going to be able to shift back and forth between the figure and the ground being black or being white. And this one's also a very good example of it. Whether the white is the ground and the black is the figure, where you see a bunch of swans flying in the air, or the black is the ground and the white is the figure, then you'll see fishes swimming in a black ocean. I think this is a really good example of it right here. You see FedEx, and you've got the white as the ground, and the FedEx Express is the figure. But if you look closely, you can switch the ground and the figure, so the white is the ground. Have you ever noticed anything special with this FedEx Express if you switch the ground and the figure? Well, if you do that, then this arrow actually appears. If the white is now your figure and the orange is your ground, then there's this arrow sticking out right here as highlighted in green. So we can review every principle we've looked at so far in closure in this word Gestalt. If you can even read Gestalt, then you know that Gestalt principles are being applied in your brain just to make this image for you. Right here in the G we have closure. You know, even though there's this big gap right here, we're filling it in at different parts because of it. Right here we have proximity. We're also using some similarity. Proximity helps us make this box, this box, this box, this box, all the boxes form together into one letter. Similarity is being used because we can distinguish the black lines from the gray lines in these boxes. Continuity, even though there's this bar going through the S, we know that the S will continue behind the bar, and so we know that continuity is being used. Similarity, we can see these T's as being the same, and so even though we know, we can kind of figure out this one using different principles like closure and proximity to figure it out. Even after we look at this T, we can look at this one and instantly recognize it because it's similar to this T. If you look at different optical illusions, you can identify the little bits and pieces of these Gestalt principles. I want you to see how many you can find when you look at this image. Alright, thank you for watching.